just what?
This is the third time I kind of wanted to do this just because it seems so awesome, and I really like it. But I just want someone to tell me what these mean because I just find it to be so it's so helpful when you tell me what it means, and then I can sort of take that in and sort of use that.
I actually like that because at this point, like, I'm not convinced for myself, well, because the painting has all these elements of like different, like, it's just like a mixtape of all these things you like. And as you said, like, you're having fun and you like what's happening, but you don't know the meaning. And from your older paintings, which also has that combination of different, like, fragments of different cultures and different, like, signifiers. At this point, I'm like, it doesn't have to. Like, it's just, it shows that you're interested. You're just amazed of like the composition of how Jesus is hanging in all the. Now you have the cool halo, the rainbow halo. Like, there's so many amazing moments in here. I feel like with the biggest one you're showing, you really like just push. I can tell that the painting pushed it far from your interest, like your genuine curiosity and like amazement of all these visual research. The painting.
Yeah, I think this big painting is really like finally culminating where your thoughts have been at recently. It feels like a big internet mashup of like kind of humorous imagery and then what Isaac was talking about. Yeah, I think you started to paint back. I think your painting was a little like stiff. You didn't have the same like humor that these paintings have now. They seem like they really leaned into like crazy internet space, and like that space is like pretty funny. I especially love how you're almost making fun of religion in this painting because you put Jesus off center and he's got a giant like snake crucifix. But I think the off-centering of it is just like kind of hilarious to me.
Ta, the past visiting artist, said that painting shouldn't be democratic. And I think with this one, you're less democratic than the past ones.
Well, see, I read, because I know snakes and paganism were, like, is that a specific reference to paganism?
Yeah.
Are you thinking about that? No. Because like, in paganism, animals kind of symbolize certain kind of, like, the snake would symbolize protection.
Yeah.
So, but, and Christianity kind of comes out of paganism, and a lot of, like, Christianity is sort of, like, when you read the Bible, which I only know this secondhand, because I have not, but, like, kind of like there's a transition out of paganism into Christianity, and so like a lot of things in the Bible sort of like are in conversation with these kinds of ideas of these kinds of things, and so I read that more like less through the internet and more through, I mean, I guess that's like the Tower of Babel, or I read these sort of as specific references, not just like a mashup, but sort of more intentional than that.
I like the way it kind of vibrates back and forth between the two.
Right.
I mean, there's a sort of arbitrary, not arbitrary thing about
Right.
it. I mean, my association with the cobras is Hindu deities, but
Oh, right.
it could
'Cause it's
go,
a cobra
it could go
specifically,
different
yeah.
ways. And,
Right.
but the thing that I noticed, Joe, in this painting, first off, is just it has a different energy quality than your earlier work, even if the imagery is, obviously descended from the earlier stuff. The way you're painting, there's a kind of translucent quality or a light quality in it that's different. And the construction of all of those different complex zones is less straightforward. It's not the sort of vanishing point and everything is disposed in relation to that vanishing point. And so the asymmetry that somebody was talking about, the whole thing keeps moving in a way that your earlier paintings didn't really do. And the way, I mean, it seems like you're applying the paint in a completely different way, and that allows for all this to happen. And I just want to say that's great. That's really working.
I like how the painting feels like it has symbols that are constantly competing for each other. Like hierarchy, it has precedent over the other, and so it's constantly going, like you said, vibrating or going back and forth. Like, is it religion? Is it, sexuality? Because from back here, it looks like a pride flag from back down up, and with the colors. And so it just it takes these symbols and then like skews it in such a way that like it kind of almost makes new meanings in a way, and I think that's really interesting.
I think of, I mean, there's one strain of, the one lineage in these paintings of yours. So like I think of I don't know who the illustrator was, but the guy who did the cover for Miles Davis's Bitches Brew. Or Jimi Hendrix's Axis Bold as Love. Or, so there's a kind of pop kitsch strain in it. And the way that's voiced is a little different in this painting. I haven't been able to figure out how to articulate that, but I don't know. It seems livelier and less sort of fixed in its attitude than your earlier paintings. Fox, do you agree with that or not?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I would say I think that the self-portrait that you did was actually the breakthrough. And this feels also like a self-portrait that just looks too much like you for me not to think it is also you. Like there's just something even about in the the way the face looks. So I feel that they're less outward looking and more intuitive. I mean, that's my psychoanalyzing him, but they feel that they're finding that, I think it takes a long time to feel paint. Like you put paint on the surface and it doesn't quite work, and then at a certain point you figure out how to put it on and it becomes something that is like an extension of your body and you feel it more. And I just think that you sort of like reached the amount of hours that you needed to paint to kind of have like how you know how to put paint on, and it just feels like it's gotten a lot easier for you, I guess. They don't feel like they require so much energy and effort for all of the detail, and so like the paint just sticks on there and you can probably paint them a little bit faster. And yeah, that's sort of some thoughts.
Yeah, I think I'm getting that quality from like the kind of clarity of the tones, like that transparency and luminosity it's getting from the finish as well. And so that's drawing me to like stained glass kind of imagery, especially like when you look at the whole composition. You've done this beautiful subtle like rainbow throughout from the top to bottom, and then the branches of the trees break that up into these really beautifully observed negative spaces that become fragments of this like stained glass composition to me. And so I feel like the complexity of religion is addressed like not just in obviously we have like a religious figure, but also the abstract compositional elements as well.
Is this dog-eating dog down here in the lower room? That was a rhetorical question. I also, I'm not quite sure what you had in mind with those over there. I think I almost love that. I mean, I love the juxtaposition of the two images, and I think that's hilarious. I wish you had taken that a little more seriously. I mean, the sort of that they're not the same size, that it's kind of stuck up there. I mean, I think the Buddha drawing next to the traffic sign or whatever, bathroom sign, I just wish the thing was a little tighter. But I think the idea is very funny.
I think they kind of explain that painting a lot more. The more I see these two drawings, well, paintings / drawings, they seem like very sort of very specific like signs to me, but they're also really open. They're not necessarily anything that I'm associating with. And then I look at this painting over here, and I kind of do the same thing, where like they really are just dictated sort of by that grid, and the light kind of goes along with that also. So then the signs don't really mean anything to me. It's more just like the sort of like the material that's being used.
You know what I will say about these paintings, Joe, and I've seen you since you've been here, and I feel like you've just become so you, and I do think that is a very undervalued quality in like what it means, like what part of like becoming, I think like you have to become the artist that you're supposed to become, like you can kind of look out there and be like, okay, that's good and that's good and that's good or whatever, but at the end of the day, like it's just you in your studio, and like, I mean, I know you're already very like that, but I mean, that's how I read those two pictures, is like, you're like walking into the men's bathroom and like identifying with that little man on the thing as you go in, like there's some like that like, it's just like there's something about the way that the arms are and the posture of that, which it doesn't look exactly like the man on the bathroom whose shoulders are sort of more down and more upright. And there's this way that I feel like, that little unicorn dog there, I think that intuition is like this really tricky thing, and like, what do you mean by that? But you have to feel it as you put it down. And I think that like, I feel you sort of, it just feel very, it's like, I identify more with these paintings because I feel like you're identifying more. And I love and I know the last crit, we sort of forced you into saying something about them, and then people took what you said and were like, I don't think any of those things are right, blah, 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 blah. It was like about the AI thing, and that was like, you probably thought like, okay, well, I'm not gonna step into that trap again. And this time you really were like, nope, I'm not stepping into that trap. And I think, it felt like perseverance. Like it took 3 times to really sort of like convince us that was important to you, that these could sort of accept our projection. And I think that is really true.
Alexander, you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm thinking a lot of what's already being said, but I keep coming back to, it seems like across all 4 works there's something about dealing with a sign break, like when in semiotics, when something becomes so overloaded with meaning it's useless, like the bathroom sign, or like a symbol is like, or like Christ, or these figures that it's like, anyone can see what they want to see in that person, so like, it reveals nothing to express it. And I think that's kind of like a Mike Kelly or like second generation pop thing with West Coast pop, of like, I want to take an alchemical symbol and take it to the point that like it doesn't mean anything anymore. It actually does become abstract, because even though everything is legible, nothing makes sense. It's doing that representational abstraction thing. In the larger painting, and also the painting next to it, I just keep coming back to, there's something interesting about taste and hallucinogenic art and medieval art and Bosch, of that we're attracted to William Blake and Swedenborgianism and Rosicrucianism and all these like cult symbol forms, and then like the way that that's being handled is a certain level of like subversive taste that gets that message across, like the way a Bosch painting is, or like that dragon that's like an alchemical dragon that you've really turned into almost like a Peter Saul painting because of the way you like underpainted it. So I keep coming back to that, which is like, you know, Barry Schwabsky wrote about how painting has always had a relationship to kitsch, that like from the beginning, painting was like within Renaissance art, it was a form of kitsch to like depict someone. And I think that that's kind of how it's operating for me intellectually, which is that like, you know, the medieval marginalia painting is kitschy, and it's also something you'd find in like a head shop or like, and it's also deeply personal for the person that does it. And all those experiences are put into a knot that I don't fully know what it means, but I enjoy it. And I really like the way the painting, to echo everyone on the left, is painted, where if it's not painted with tempera, it feels like it is, or like every mark is done in a way that feels like it's drawing too quick for you to be able to do anything with it, drawing before it can be blended. And so you're layering on these kind of semi-translucent colors that feel kind of yogi. And that feels, again, like you're LARPing as a medieval, you know, painter on wood, you know? There's like a little bit of LARP going on, and a little bit of, I'm going to hide behind these camouflages of super mainstream symbolic images that like, I'm turning these into avatars or characters, or turning, you know, religious figures into like that reminds me of the Boeing Man, like the way you did the drawing on the far right. Like the first digital model of a figure was like the figure sitting in the Boeing airplane, was like one of the first 3D renderings. And you're doing that to a religious symbol. I don't know what it fully means, but it's interesting.
Quick sidebar on the subject of air tempera and that transparency. There's a massive show that just opened at the Met of Sienese painting, that is from Siena in the 12, 13, 1400s. That I just wanted to, this is some of the most sublimely beautiful paintings ever. And they are most often in egg tempera, and it has this very special luminosity that I was, he was talking about it. I thought of it too. But Joe, it used to be that all the painting, your paintings was done the same way. The application was very uniform. But here you're really playing with it, and the streaks, the dots, the whole thing. It really livens the whole vision up dramatically when you do that. When you give yourself permission to do that.
Yeah. And I like really enjoy too in the left painting. It feels like a build off of the paint to the right. It's kind of like doing the medieval thing that operates the same way that it seems like video games do now, where it's like an open world. Like the further you walk back, there are all these little micro events happening. It's meant to keep your attention forever locked into it. If like one day you can wake up and look at the ducks in the river, the next day you can look at like the fire in the background. I think that kind of like scenes within scenes within scenes is doing something interesting. But I don't know. It's also, I think in a productive way, close to like a type of clanging, like a type of like self-disidentification, or like a fracturing of self that is really probably appropriate for like virtual images.
Appropriate.
Yeah, like it feels like the disassociation we feel from like too much online content, and like I think the way that's formally handled in the work is what Stephen was saying, everything being handled kind of in a similar way, but then all these tiny little worlds, And I think that, like, I don't know, it was like my own claiming, like there's that recent music video, or that recent A$AP Rocky music video, and it feels important and interesting just because it's like all these different people very loudly expressing themselves without any sense of the person next to them, It's like all these people, super subjectivities, but no interconnectedness. And I feel like you're kind of doing that with like medieval art, where it's like everyone is their own alchemist and figure out their own way for success, but there's no community, everyone's a peasant.
There's another aspect of this painting, and I realize this is something that's been true of your paintings pretty much all along, that this is neither good nor bad, it's just something that I feature that I noticed. The different incidents in the painting are all displaying themselves to the viewer. They're not in relation to each other. That really reinforces that sense of alienation, or like this the very funny and beautifully painted snake here in the creek on the left is completely oblivious to the dog action on the right. And just in general, that's the way it goes. You know, nothing is aware of anything else in the painting,
Yeah.
but it's all facing us.
Right.
You know?
Are we allowed to know what AOY?
Logos, the Greek word logos means the word.
Oh. Yeah, that's in Greek Orthodox churches, right?
It's all over, yeah. It's the, you know, the New Testament was originally in Greek. You know, so like in the beginning was the word, logos is the Greek for that.
And you went to the Greek Orthodox Church, right, Joe?
No, but it's right next to my house, maybe I'll,
Oh, okay.
maybe I'll check it out.
I think there's another way this new work is successful to me, because in the past your painting kind of stood next to like a general world religion, and it was sort of, this was a strange place to like paint from, but now you seem to be like standing in front of it, and like you're talking at world religion, and there's sort of now you've turned that on its head, and it's working much more successfully, I feel like, in these paintings. Now that it seems like you're saying something more about it instead of sort of just using it passively.
I feel that way too, but I don't know why.
Yeah.
I feel like I can, maybe I'm like I'm starting to get to why. I feel like, just to kind of reiterate a bit of what people are saying, it's like these different symbols, because now they've been juxtaposed. I don't know, it reminds me a bit of like David Saleh. Is that what you say?
I was thinking David Saleh too.
Yeah, like now they've been deprived of like their meaning, but I feel like the way that they're being juxtaposed, like the guy on the snake cross is like supposed to be having his moment, but then the dogs are like humping in front of him, which is like so funny. I feel like it's that humor that is depriving that action of its meaning, and I feel like I feel like the humor aspect to the painting is like, Joe, in the beginning when you were asking me like what does it mean, I feel like whatever you're saying, what it means, it's like being conveyed through humor.
Running with that a little, there was something that I have reservations about in the earlier paintings, there was almost a kind of plotting quality to the way they were executed, you know, one foot after the other doing the same kind of action until you're done. This has none of that. I mean, I think that the whole thing with this, all of these flickering, tiny shapes up here is amazing. I mean, there's the way these patterns work with these patterns. I think you've got so much bolder and freer with that kind of very complicated, you know, multi-pattern articulation. It's really amazing.
See, I don't know about the screen thing. Like, I think what I also enjoy about them is that I feel like medieval paintings do that. Like, there's different people doing different things in the same scene, and they seem not to notice each other. And it gives a sense of like, I guess it's called parallel play in like psychoanalysis, you know,
Nice,
like when
yeah.
you're doing something and then your friend is doing something, but it's different than you, but you're like in the same room together, and like that's like community, you know, like that's like, that feels nice.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you're content and I'm content and we're both doing things, but it's like different, and we're not worrying about each other. And like this feels like there's like a kind of sense of, like it actually to me has a sense of community. Like there's two birds, I mean not two birds, a double-headed bird in front of 5 snakes, and like they don't seem particularly bothered by each other. Like everybody in there's just a sense of like that people are, like even those 2 dogs, like the one on the bottom, they don't, I wouldn't say that they're humping, I would say that they're playing like dogs do, and they're kind of fighting, and they like domination games, and one on the bottom is like, okay, you got me this time, you know? Like I feel like there's just some sense of like, yeah, it just feels like they feel good to me. Sorry, I mean like that's like a really like not a very professional or
No,
whatever.
the
big, but-
parallel play thing is
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
I definitely feel that too,
Yeah,
now that you put it that way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there is something weird that's, well, you know, the like benign, malign tension in
Yeah.
there, you know? But are they, you know, I mean, you have these snakes and birds in a threatening situation, or dogs potentially, you know, one's killing the other, or they're having sex, or whatever they're doing. But then it's not clear, really, you know, I mean, it's
Yeah.
all fine, in the context of the painting, it's all fine.
yeah. I've been very slowly reading this book by Marilyn Robinson. That's a reading of Genesis. So I guess I'm kind of like, because that's like sort of in my mind, and a lot of the reading, like what's sort of at stake for her in this reading of Genesis is like all of the sort of bullshit that we have put on to the stories. She's really trying to undo, like, even like the story of Adam and Eve. She's like, that is, like, sin is about free will, like, that's just a misinterpretation. And she goes back to the etymology of all the words and says, like, this would have meant this in this context, so it's not actually, like, even the word bad, like, we sort of translate maybe as evil. No, the word evil would have just been, like, bad in a sort of more ordinary sense, like, the sort of, like, ratcheting up of that word. You can't really apply to it. That's just like the recent translation. And so she sort of like has this subtle way of kind of like re-articulating a lot of the stories in a way that feels more like about what I'm sort of getting out of it is like, yeah, these things happen, these instances happen, these stories like which are possibly people, and the sort of telling of them is much more filled with ambivalence and kind of like curiosity and openness than the sort of assigned moralizing meaning, the heavy-handedness that and I feel like this sort of has that quality to it that I'm sort of getting out of this Genesis reading.
To take a stab at the symbolic meaning of it though, like, I mean, it is, like, one, the crucifixion reminds me of the Fassbender early in Alexander plots, like the way, like, someone said the crucifixion is happening kind of in the background, where like everyone's distracted from it. Like it's happening, but everyone doesn't care. But like the way, you know, the Christ figure is on the snake cross, that's like the Gnostic, but also the alchemical thing of like negation, or like a super balancing of like good and evil. And that is like, I mean, I think there's a reason why artists have always been interested in alchemy, which is like, it is, before the language of it, it's like dialectical opposition. Like you create a tension by having the figure of good on the figure of evil, and like the two are, you know, writhing together. And like that's the, and also, I mean, like, I'm trying to remember who talked, I mean, a lot of people do, but like the contradictions of the cross, like it's the Apollonian superstructure of the thing, but then the fleshy Dionysian thing of the body. That like it is at once structure and not structure, and then it's metaphysical too. Like the way I interpret that part of the painting is that it's like really a painting game, like within it. It's like what happens when I collide ironies, and then I guess like the other way to think is like it's very mise en abîme-like. It's like ironies within ironies within ironies, or like small mirrored forms of that. Of like if a painting is about taking opposition and colliding them together to see what it produces, what if I then paint the same kind of symbol within it? And what if I paint it in a way that's also a symbol of it? I don't know what it means to layer irony so densely in that way, but I think it's interesting that you're doing it.
Well, who is it's like who? Was that
The-
a name that you said?
The name that started with an M.
Yeah.
Oh,
And-
mise en, you said.
Oh, mise en abîme. It's like scene within a scene, or a painting within a painting.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Or
right,
it's
right,
Or
right.
like,
French word
or it's
for
like
that,
a,
Okay.
Yeah.
Spinoza, it's
I
like.
don't speak French. I
No, no,
apologize.
Like Mies van der Rohe.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
It's sort of a French word, but that is used in like art history books.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so a scene within a scene.
Yeah.
Or like mirrored rooms within mirrored rooms. It's like the monadic principle of like things get smaller and they reflect the larger thing each time it gets smaller. And like I think that's really interesting. It's like a type of image tunneling that you're doing, you know?
Yeah, like the fracturing of the back of the space, like you feel like it could keep going on forever.
Yeah. You know, along with all of this sort of complicated stuff, there's also a kind of simple pleasure in making the painting that comes across very strongly in it, you know? Which, and then that adds another kind of resonance to the whole